Lulu, let's start with you. We've watched it tonight several times. You gave Vance 5 opportunities to say Trump lost the election. What was going through your mind as he pushed back the second time, the third time, and on and on?
I think one of the things that's really important to understand is this is one of the key questions of this election. We've seen in polls, we've seen over and over voters saying that democracy is also on the ballot. People are concerned about this issue. 2020 is on their minds, and Donald Trump has refused to acknowledge that he lost that election. J.D. Vance is a hair's breadth from becoming the vice president of this country, and so pressing him on this issue is important because we know over and over again that it is a lie, the big lie, at the center of what Donald Trump requires people around him to say. And so by pressing him over and over again, really there is just one question and there are two answers. The question was the one that I said, and the answer is yes or no. And the fact that he couldn't give a yes or no, I think, is extremely telling. And what I'm doing there is really try to make sure that the voters understand the position that J.D. Vance holds, and by extension, the Trump campaign.
Right. And he said that you were using a slogan when you just presented him with these facts that, yes, indeed, Trump lost.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this interview featuring J.D. Vance and this woke liberal New York Times reporter by the name of Lulu Garcia Navarro. Now, this woman is going to confront J.D. Vance on if he believes that Trump lost the 2020 election. Now, for whatever reason, the mainstream liberal media thinks that this is a topic that we should be discussing going into the 2024 election because they're trying to use it as a reason to attack Trump. However, this issue is not an issue that I think is a big issue going into the 2024 election, right? I do not think this is going to move the needle, right? No matter how much the mainstream liberal media wants to make a big deal out of 2020, right? They want to rehash and relitigate 2020 so badly, right? You remember the debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, how the mainstream liberal media basically ended up coping with the fact that Tim Walz got his butt whooped by J.D. Vance by saying that, well, I think that Tim Walz, he won the debate because he asked J.D. Vance if Trump won the 2020 election and J.D. Vance wouldn't answer the question, right? Basically, J.D. Vance didn't take debate, right? J.D. Vance was not trying to rehash the 2020 election, which is what the mainstream liberal media wants. And for that reason, they thought that Tim Walz won the debate. Now, fast forward is almost 2 weeks after the debate, and the polls are moving in a favorable direction for Trump, not so much for Kamala Harris, which tells you everything you need to know about how much the American people actually care about this issue. They don't, right? They don't, right? Which is why I find this interview here to be comical, right? It is a comical attempt at trying to smear the Trump campaign because you know that the liberal media and the Democrats are desperate when they go back to talking about January 6th in the 2020 election, right? So without further ado, I want to react to this interview in which J.D. Vance is once again going to refuse to take debate. He's not going to fall for the gotcha here that this New York Times reporter is so desperately trying to get. Let's get into it.
In the debate, you were asked to clarify if you believe Trump lost the 2020 election. Do you believe he lost the 2020 election?
I think that Donald Trump and I have both raised a number of issues with the 2020 election, but we're focused on the future. I think there's an obsession here with focusing on 2020. I'm much more worried about what happened after 2020, which is a wide open border, groceries that are unaffordable. And look,
Senator,
Lulu,
yes or no?
Okay.
Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Let me ask you a question. Is it okay that big technology companies censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, which independent analysis have said cost Donald Trump millions of votes?
Senator Vance, I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
Did big technology companies censor a story that independent studies have suggested would have cost Trump millions of votes?
Senator
I think that's
Vance,
the question.
I'm going to ask you again. Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
And I've answered your question with another question. You answer my question and I'll answer yours.
I have asked this question repeatedly. It is something that is very important for the American people to know.
No, it's not, bruh. No, it's not. No, it's not. Again, ask Democrats. Did Al Gore lose the 2000 election to George Bush? Did he lose the 2000 election? Because Democrats, a lot of Democrats believe that Al Gore actually won that election. They refuse to say that George Bush won fair and square. Now, is it important for us to know whether or not all Democrats believe that Al Gore lost fair and square, right? Is it important for us to know? I guarantee you, if you ask this woman that question, she say, nah, it's not important, right? It's not a big deal. So if that's not a big deal, why is the 2020 election a big deal? We can't go back and change the result. Biden has been president for 4 years. And as JD Vance is rightfully pointing out, he's been a terrible disaster, right? That is what we should be focused on. But what the media wants to do is that they want to distract you from the real issues at hand. And they want to try to make out 2020 to be an issue, right? When 2020 is no more of an issue than 2000, right? Or 2016. Ask Hillary, did Trump win the 2016 election fair and square? Did you lose fair and square, right? And I don't want to hear anything about no Russia. I don't want to hear anything about Putin. I don't want to hear anything about Facebook ads, right? I don't want to hear anything about that. Did Hillary lose fair and square? I guarantee you a vast majority of Democrats would be hard pressed to say that Hillary lost fair and square in 2016, but they're never asked that question. Because it's totally fine for Democrats to claim that the 2000 election was stolen from Al Gore. It's totally fine for them to claim that the 2016 election was stolen from Hillary Clinton. But if Trump claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him, all of a sudden, oh, well, that's an important question that we have to continue to talk about for years, right? We have to make sure that you acknowledge that Trump lost fair and square, when Hillary still has not acknowledged that she lost fair and square. And what I also found to be hilarious about this is JD Vance bringing up big tech censorship, right? And the reason why I love JD Vance bringing this up is because liberals, again, total hypocrites on this issue, right? They'll say that, oh, well, that didn't affect the outcome of the election, big tech censorship, right? Big tech, they don't have anything to do with the affecting the outcome of the election. But right now, they're boohoo, whining, and crying, they're kicking and screaming about Elon Musk, right? And X, and how that is potentially going to affect the outcome of the 2024 election, right? But they don't want to acknowledge that the big tech platforms in 2020 and their role in affecting the outcome of the 2020 election. And then they'll go and say that, well, Russia buying Facebook ads in 2016 made Hillary lose because Russia convinced black people not to vote for Hillary, right? These are the arguments they make. They fully acknowledge the effects of censorship and social media on the outcome of elections when they lose, right? When they lose, when it's not in their favor, they'll boohoo, whine, and cry, say, oh, this is not fair, we don't like it, right? But yet they refuse to acknowledge the effects of social media on the elections when they win, right? And how social media went out of their way in 2020 to try to sway the outcome of the election in favor of Joe Biden. Everybody saw it. Everybody knows it. This is an undisputable fact. And see, this is why people don't care that much. This is why it's not moving the needle, because Democrats are huge hypocrites on this issue. They have no room whatsoever to lecture anybody when it comes to election denialism, right? They are the OG election deniers. I don't have to go through my usual talking points, right? I don't have to do that. Everybody should be aware of the long history of election denialism from Democrats. But I think what really pisses me off about this conversation is that Democrats aren't held to the same standard that Republicans are held to when it comes to being forced to acknowledge that the election was fair and square, when, again, that to me in and of itself is a very silly thing. And I also think it's very dangerous to say that no matter what happens in an election, you have to say it was fair and square, as if it is impossible for there to be fraudulent activities that affect the outcome of an election. That to me is my biggest issue with this, right? And that's essentially what's going to come up here later in this interview.
There is no proof, legal or otherwise, that Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election.
You're repeating a slogan rather than engaging with what I'm saying, which is that when our own technology firms engage in industrial scale censorship, by the way, backed up by the federal government, in a way that independent studies suggest affect the votes, I'm worried about Americans who feel like there were problems in 2020. I'm not worried about this slogan that people throw. Well, every court case went this way. I'm talking about something very discrete, a problem of censorship in this country that I do think affected things in 2020, and more importantly, that led to Kamala Harris's governance, which has screwed this country up in a big way.
Senator, would you have certified the election in 2020? Yes or no?
I've said that I would have voted against certification because of the concern that I just raised. I think that when you have technology companies,
The answer is no.
when you have technology companies censoring Americans at a mass scale in a way that, again, independent studies have suggested affect the vote, I think that it's right to protest against that, to criticize that, and that's a totally reasonable thing.
So the answer is no. And the last question, will you support the election results this time and commit to a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, first of all, of course, we commit to a peaceful transfer of power. We are going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I, of course, believe that peaceful transfer of power is going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. But if there are problems, of course, in the same way that Democrats protested in 2004 and Donald Trump raised issues in 2020, we're going to make sure that this election counts, that every legal ballot is counted. We've filed almost 100 lawsuits at the RNC to try to ensure that every legal ballot has counted. I think you would maybe criticize that. We see that as an important effort to ensure election integrity, but certainly we're going to respect the results in 2024, and I feel very confident they're going to make Donald Trump the next president.
Yeah, so the liberal media is triggered by this, right, for obvious reasons, because J.D. Vance refused to bend the knee. Now, here's the thing. They're asking questions that, in my opinion, are just totally irrelevant, right? Because if Trump loses, Trump has basically already said he's not running again. He's not in power. J.D. Vance is just a senator. There's no real way for Trump or J.D. Vance to try to overturn the election outside of legally challenging the election. Now, here's why I have a problem with the mainstream liberal media. Because they are basically trying to force Republicans to say before any vote is counted, right, before the election that, hey, well, you're going to accept the results no matter what, right? And it's like, no. We don't have to accept the results no matter what. Like, that's a very silly question. Like, I'm not going to accept the results no matter what, because what that implies is that, well, even if there is fraudulent activity, which is possible, okay? It is possible that fraudulent activity can occur, okay? No, I don't have to accept the results no matter what. That's why you have a certification process in the first place, right? To hash out those issues just in case there are issues with the election, right? Which is a core function of democracy. And see, this is what really pisses me off about these people in this whole conversation, is that these democracy crusaders show you every chance they get they don't actually believe in democracy, because a core function of democracy should be to be able to challenge elections that people feel are not conducted fairly or conducted correctly, right? And you let the legal process play out. You have a process in place where you can debate these challenges, and if the challenges are successful, then great. If the challenges are not successful, then hey, that's okay too, right? We move on. We move forward, okay, as a country. But when you're trying to set the precedent that no matter what happens, that you can't challenge the election, you can't say that, hey, there's issues with the election and that we need to take a look at some of the issues, that is very anti-democratic, right? Because in order to have a functioning democracy, and yes, I already know there's people in the comment section that are going to say we're not a democracy, we're a republic, we're a constitutional republic. Yes, I agree. Just for the sake of this conversation, I'm just going to use the term democracy, right? Just for the sake of this video, okay? Just to make a point. In order for people to believe in the process has to undergo scrutiny, right? You have to be able to scrutinize the process and to double and to triple and quadruple check to make sure that the process was conducted in a way that was legitimate, right? That everybody can accept and say, okay, the system is functioning as it should. So when you come out here and you start to tell people that, no, you can't question the system and whether or not it's functioning properly, you can't do that, or else you're an election denier, you're a bad person, and you should be thrown in jail, right? Your speech should be censored. That opens up the door for fraudulent activity. That basically is a free rein for those who may be looking to affect the outcome of the election to conduct fraudulent activity, okay? And that's the problem with this. That's the problem with this line of questioning from the media. Because again, they never do this when Democrats challenge the election. Democrats have challenged the outcome of the election in court. They've made all types of wild claims about everything from the ballots okay, to the machines. They've challenged the election in Congress where they exercise their right as members of Congress to say, hey, these are the problems that I have with this state and how they conducted the election. And this is why I think that we should look at it. This is something that Jamie Ratkins did in 2016. Maxine Waters did it in 2016. Numerous Democrats, the ones that come out here and say, oh, you can't challenge elections no matter what, right? They all did this. They all did this. And the funny part about it is that if Trump wins, there's zero doubt in my mind they will be doing it again, right? They will be the first ones kicking and screaming and crying and saying, oh, it wasn't fair. We don't like it. And there'll be the same people that'll be in Congress exercising their ability as members of Congress to say, hey, we have issues with the election for X, Y, and Z reason. And this is why we don't want to certify for X, Y, and Z reason. They will be doing that, right? Does anybody imagine a scenario where Kamala Harris actually is going to certify an election that she lost without any challenges whatsoever from Democrats? Like, come on, right? Really? Does anybody really believe that Kamala Harris is going to do that? The Democrats are just going to let it slide, right? Does anybody really believe that? That they're going to sign up for another 4 years of Trump after boohoo, whining, and crying, claiming that the guy is Hitler, right? And that he's going to end democracy, that he's going to throw them in the gulags, right? That he's going to assassinate his political opponents. Do you really think these people are just going to be okay if President Trump wins and they're not going to challenge it at all? Come on, right? Come on. We all know that they're going to. And that's the hilarious part about it. I think that this question really should be asked towards Democrats because they're the ones that are in power. And when you're talking about the potential for political violence, which I hope there is none, right? I hope there's none whatsoever. Liberal cities are the places that are going to be boarding up before the election. Well, why is that? It's not going to be in anticipation of Kamala Harris winning. No, it's going to be in anticipation of Kamala Harris losing. Because if Kamala Harris loses, we all know the leftists, they will be kicking and screaming and crying, right? Throwing a fit, raging like they always do every time they lose, right? So again, I just find it fascinating how Republicans are the only ones getting these questions when I think that Democrats really should be the ones answering the questions because I think they're the ones that are most likely to try to challenge the election if they lose. They're the ones that are most likely to be in the streets rioting and raging if they lose. And that's the most annoying part about these conversations. But regardless, shout out to JD Vance for not falling for the gotcha here, right? Not going for it because that's all they're trying to do. She's trying to get a gotcha. That's all she wants. That's all she wants. And JD Vance is too smart for the gotcha. And I find it hilarious how they really think that this is such a big issue that's going to affect voters. It's already baked in. Everybody has their opinion about the 2020 election and January 6th. And honestly, at the end of the day, I think most people have moved on past it. But the mainstream liberal media, they have not, right? They are obsessed with 2020. And, you know, I just personally think, again, none of this stuff is going to work. They're just throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.